Do you crave better self esteem and confidence, but struggle to silence your anxiety, fears, and insecurities? If so, welcome to the sisterhood of fellow travelers on the path to reclaiming their self confidence and happiness. I'm Jennifer DeBellis, award winning author, speaker, and assault survivor. I spent the past few decades helping young women like you overcome fear, self doubt, and trauma to reclaim their joy and self worth. I cannot wait to share the secrets I learned on my own healing journey and help you restore your inner warrior as I show you the skills and tools you need to save your own broken world. If you're ready to empower your inner warrior to overcome fear, doubt, and anxiety, turn off those distractions and tune in to this episode. Last episode, we explored how to get back on track when the path to happiness is overshadowed by fogged thoughts and vision caused by limited perspective. Today's episode probes deeper into this perspective concept to break down how and why it can work to your advantage and to offer you strategies to implement in your current and future struggles. I've had my share of trials and errors where this topic is concerned. Yet, once I began to understand a few simple things about how perspective controls our fears and doubts and the anxiety that comes along for the ride, I started to radically reduce these struggles, and I did so in real time. I can't wait to show you these simple, life-changing skills to use as you navigate your stressful situations. And believe it or not, these really are powers you already have to help you retrain your focus to decrease fear, doubt, dread, and the anxiety that fuels these emotions. In this episode, you'll gain a deeper understanding of how to use perspective to your advantage. You'll see how my own experiences with shifting my perspective have positively impacted my interactions and their outcomes, and you'll learn some simple steps and strategies for gaining perspective clarity from previous encounters and to implement it in real time. If you're ready to boldly step into a life with improved happiness and confidence, turn off those distractions running in the background so you can supercharge your inner healing journey with this next episode. And welcome back to all my listeners already walking with me down this restoration path. As we established last episode, how we view situations and interactions is controlled by our focus, our biases, our vantage points, and all of these are informed by our prior experiences and how we have or have not processed these. Our perspective also controls how we respond in situations and interactions. So you can see how important it is then for us to understand our processing process. It's also important to learn from prior experiences. This might come as a shock to you, but it's work to cultivate a healthy perspective. One that equips us to respond as informed characters in our own story. Sometimes it's hard work, really hard work, but I love to remind myself, like one of my daughters gave me a water bottle that says, "Beautiful girl, you're capable of hard things." And I look at that water bottle sometimes when things are really, really hard, and I remember that my daughters even believe in my ability to do hard things. And that's just something that I also worked really, really hard to instill in them as I was also working to instill that in myself. Your quality of life and you are worth it though. So it doesn't matter how hard the work is, you're worth it. And you really do already hold the power to shift and control your perspective. You just need to develop some new habits to operate like the warrior you were born to be. I know this can fill you with fear, doubt, and dread, which spiral your anxiety, and that warrior within is waiting for your command to get to work. Seriously. Do you know your survival rate from life's post-storm shipwrecks is 100%? You have survived them 100% of the time. And yet, we let all of that doubt and fear and anxiety overshadow and control us and freeze us up and get us in survival mode when we're confronted with new challenges, when we're confronted with situations and struggles that we have to navigate. We have to get through them. The thing is, the quicker you get a handle on your perspective in a situation and respond with informed discernment and wisdom, the quicker you can get back to the things and thoughts that bring you joy and happiness. And yet we keep finding ourselves getting stuck in this futile cycle where we're chasing our tail, where we're doing things that we know haven't worked in the past, or where we fall into the trap of, the victim in a situation, and then we forget everything that we've done, or we forget who we are. We lose our identity in that moment of fear and panic and self-doubt. But you can't get stuck there, and you can't get stuck resisting the process, or the process of others will definitely master you and your interactions with these individuals. So resisting prolongs all the uncomfortable things. So resisting is not the answer here. I learned this lesson years ago when I was in a motorcycle accident. You may recall me mentioning the motorcycle accident in several of the episodes in the last couple of weeks. And today I just want to talk about how my injuries caused me to accept a perspective view of my future life that I didn't need to accept. So when I was going through therapy, I was told I would never run again. I'm a runner. I've been a runner since I started walking. And then I was faced with just trying to heal and just trying to walk right again. And I ended up figuring out a lot of different activities that I could do instead of run. And, I rollerbladed, and I would, hike and walk, and, I played softball and co-ed volleyball. So I did a lot of things that were fun. But I was missing a huge component of what made me me, what brought me a lot of joy, which was sometimes running. Sometimes running is just really hard work. It's hard on your body, but all of the effects afterward. It was the only thing that really helped me gain the physique that I wanted, the energy levels that I wanted, that lasted for days and days and days. One run will fuel me for days. And I just love the way I feel afterward, for days afterward. My whole emotional landscape is so improved after it. And nothing really was a substitute for that. It didn't work for me the same way. And so for years, I went thinking that I couldn't run again because that's what the doctor said. And then one day I was talking to a nutritionist, and she asked me, like, well, what do you love to do? And I said, run. And she said, well, why don't you run more? And I said, oh, well, I can't run because, the doctor said I can't run anymore. And she kind of looked at me like, what? Like, that was the most ridiculous thing anybody had ever said to her. And as she was looking at me and I was processing that look, I thought, yeah, that's probably one of the most ridiculous things I've heard myself say in my entire life, too. Because I knew once I said it out loud like that to someone else who knew otherwise, my perspective immediately started to shift. And then I started to recognize, like, maybe I can do that. It's a desire that I have. I get it. Sometimes things happen in life and we aren't able to resume certain activities or a certain quality of life. And so I was open to trying. And it was hard. It was hard on my body, pushing through some of the pain and the discomfort and the lackluster and the lack of joy. And I thought, okay, I'm going to give this, I said, I'm going to give it a month because I know you can develop a new habit in 21 days. I said, I'm going to give it 30 days. And if nothing comes into alignment, so I get it, it's a lot of work starting something over from scratch. If things don't come into alignment, then I'm going to scratch it. And something I had been doing leading up to my first run, so before I even hit the pavement and said, I'm going to go for a run, is I was doing the elliptical to build up all of these same muscle groups and to get my breathing and my cardio capacity ready for a run. So I was doing all these things on top of, walking and doing all kind of like, kickboxing classes and things also. So I was doing all these different things, continuing all the different sports and activities that I love. But then I started the running, and I was only doing it like 2 or 3 times a week. And I was alternating the distances and doing some intervals and, all the different things that you do to increase your endurance and also to be able to go farther. So I was doing all these things, and within a month, I actually started to be able to run without the shoulder pain that I was experiencing from my nerve damage and injury. And I started to get good at it again. Just 1 month.
1 month of the hard work, I was like, oh my God, I can do this again. And that was a couple decades ago. So in the end of this changing of perspective, it was when I rejected that perspective that I had just accepted. It wasn't my perspective either. It was someone else's perspective that I had adopted as my own. And I allowed that to keep me from doing something I really enjoyed doing and all the benefits that come with, something as simple as running. I know it's hard, but you know what I mean. Something as simple as just being able to run, doing this thing that I really, really get so many benefits from. I mean, my kids would tell me, like, if I was getting really, really cranky, they would say, "Oh my God, Mom, when's the last time you went for a run?" And then I would say, "I don't know, it's been like 3 days." And they're like, "Just go for a run, please." And they were dead serious about, "You're so crabby." Like they knew I was going to be in a much happier mood and so much more emotionally healthy by going for the run. And so they knew this about me. So, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say it really enhanced my emotional landscape. And it all came down to me rejecting that perspective, shifting my perspective, doing all of the hard work to get that back into my life as a regular routine part of my regular life and improving my quality of life the whole time. So now, fast forward to my recent scrape with near death. So a few months ago, I got really, really sick, and I'm not even going to get into that here. I've mentioned it in another episode, but I got really, really sick. They couldn't figure out what was wrong with me, and I was hospitalized. I lost my voice. My esophagus was closing up. I couldn't eat. It was horrible. Couldn't sleep, couldn't stop coughing. It was really, really bad. And so modern medicine was like aggravating my conditions by misdiagnosing me and mistreating me. And I almost died. So I took them 5 days in the hospital to stabilize me. And in that process, I obviously couldn't even get off the couch for a couple of weeks. I was bedridden, but I haven't run since, gosh, since before Memorial Day weekend. So it's now the end of July. So it's been like over 2 months. So for over 2 months, I have not gone on a run. In the interim, because I was pumped up with so many steroids through multiple visits to these different hospitals, as a result of that, when I was coming off of the steroids, I injured my rotator cuff and my arm has been really, really bad. And so now that my breathing was getting a little bit better and I'm walking again and doing all this cross training stuff, I'm like, I can't run with my arm like this. Like my whole back will be aggravated. And so finally today was like perfect timing. So I went for my first run today after over 2 months. And even just working up to that the last few days, knowing like, okay, I'm going to go for a run soon. I had to keep readjusting my perspective again. And I had to do all of that work of, again, mentally preparing, thinking about what was on the horizon, thinking about what I would do to adjust, how I would navigate this experience, what I would do to be kind to myself. You don't want to say like, oh, you've got to get 3 miles in. So I literally just had this whole perspective mindset that I was in. It's not my first rodeo, so I'm using all this prior experience. It's not the second time that I hadn't been able to go for a run for a long time. I mean, there's been other instances in my life where I've had an injury or something and it's been months that I couldn't run. So I have a healthy perspective on how to get back on track with this particular thing that I love to do. And I wasn't expecting to enjoy the run because sometimes if you haven't done something for a while, it just sucks when you do it after you haven't done it for a while. So I wasn't expecting to enjoy the run, and I enjoyed the run. I was like, look, if you can just get past a mile. I went on a 3 mile walk with one of my daughters before I went on the run. But I was like, if you can just get to the fourth mile, so I ran from mile 3 to 4, then anything after that's a bonus. And my goal, honestly, was between 1 and 1.5 miles. I'm like, if I can get 1.5, that's going to be amazing. And so I go out, I hit the mile marker, and I'm like, I can do more. So then I go, I hit the mile and a half, and I'm like, okay, I can do more. And I made it 2 miles. And that was incredible. And I've felt incredible all day. Like I know, my body's going to be a little bit sore, especially tomorrow morning, and I can feel some of that soreness coming on. But those are all things I already have in my perspective wrapped around, and I'm prepared for those things and doing some of the things that I need to do. And I'm not going to get into all that stuff because this podcast isn't about running, but I'm doing all those things. I put the perspective into place and the plan into place. And if things didn't go the way I anticipated them, I would readjust that perspective in order to still have success. So you set yourself up to have success with, you know, recognizing that things aren't always going to go the way that you want them to go, but also setting realistic expectations, knowing what you know about the larger picture of what you see. So by now, you might be wondering how I retrain my perspective to overcome challenges and to learn from stressful experiences that fire up my anxiety. That's right, I have anxiety too. And I get that nervousness that comes up and that dread that, like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to deal with this person. Blah, 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 blah. You know what it is. Or the fear of they're going to embarrass me. They're gonna, whatever, fill in the blank. They're gonna blah, blah, blah. So the first thing is that I know what I want as my end game. I know what I want the end to look like. I have goals. I have dreams. I have desires, and I'm very aware of those things. I know I've mentioned this in other episodes, and some of you who are like, oh my God, I'm not doing this. You got to write it down. You got to commit things to the page. There's a biblical principle that I live by that is what's bound on earth is bound in heaven. And so what we say, what we write, right? We're signing it into writing is like a commitment. It's like a contract or a covenant. And so when you're saying, I'm going to do this thing or I want this goal, you're committing it here. And wherever you're committing it here, it's committed in your spiritual life as well, if you have a spiritual life. So you need to journal and or meditate about these things until you know what you want. You can't get a healthy perspective on how to navigate situations, how to navigate crisis or, struggles or stress if you don't know what your outcomes are. Like you need to know what your intended outcomes are. That has to exist. So a lot of times you're getting upset, you're frustrated, but you don't even know what you want. That's frustrating. You're getting frustrated, but you don't know what you're after. So anybody who came along to be the savior for you that day wouldn't even be able to be your savior if such a thing existed because you couldn't even tell them what you want. And so part of having a good perspective is first knowing your own. You have to know your own perspective. Everything goes through this eyesight, goes through this lens of sight. So what do you want? And maybe it's not like the end of the road kind of goals, but have them for the situations, have them for interactions. What are you hoping to get out of a relationship, a romantic relationship? What are you hoping to get out of a friendship? Somebody who you go and do athletic stuff with? What are you hoping to get out of your Bible study and all of the people in your group, in those interactions? What are you hoping to get out of your career? You have to know these things. You have to identify the details of these things. Not just be like, oh, I think I want this. It's a much more nuanced thing that you have to actually parse out. You have to figure out the finer details of these things. So, yeah, you could just meditate on it, but that's like lazy. My husband pulls that crap. Oh, I'm just going to meditate on it. Oh, I don't want to walk all the way over there and get my journal. Oh, I don't, that's too much work. Oh, I can't read my handwriting. Every excuse under the sun. But then you ask him, all right, what'd you come up with when you meditate? Right? So if meditation is just going to your nothing box and just sitting there and like, oh, rabbit, squirrel, it doesn't allow you to be on task. Like some people are just not good at meditating either, or they meditate on something and they have all these really great, insightful, like epiphanies and interactions, and they're praying about it and they're having all these wonderful thoughts. And then when someone says, like, oh, well, tell me about it. they like, oh, I don't remember exactly. Again, it's like I tell writers, if you have an idea while you're falling asleep, you better have a notepad next to your bed or the notes app in your phone, and you better write it down because in the morning it's going to be gone. You can tell yourself all day long, oh, I'll remember it. It's such a great idea. And then you wake up and you're like, dang it, I didn't write it down. You do, you forget things. So writing things down is important for all of these reasons. And then take this a step further and identify what you have to do to get it. There's a lot of little nuances that exist for a particular goal or particular desire or particular outcome, but there's also things that you have to do to get it. And so you have to be aware of those things. That's part of your perspective. If you're walking into a situation, whether it's the long-term goal of going after that dream, or you're just walking into one situation, one interaction that's only an hour, only a few hours long, and you haven't identified like what you have to do to get the results that you want, and then you wonder why you're failing. You wonder why you're getting yourself anxious and stressed out because you don't have a strategy. You don't like, I know I hate to sound like everything's a game, I don't want you to think like everything you do with people is playing a game, but in essence, you have to have a plan. Anytime you're interacting with other people, you have to have a plan. What do you hope to get out of this, and how do you hope to get it? And of course, you can't control and pre-plan every single thing that you're going to do with this other person because this other person or other people, they have their own will. They have their own motives, their own objectives, their own things that they hope to get out of this experience. Also, all you planner people who have to have everything just go just so, it doesn't quite work that way. You are going to stress yourself and everybody else out even more when you try to control every little thing without regard for the fact that there's other personalities involved. So having a plan just means I kind of know how I want to act. I kind of know, how I hope things will go. And then you're going to do the things to spur that on. You're going to try to initiate those things, to pull those things out of the experience. You got to put in the work to chase after this end goal desire. Okay? It's work. So I'm using game analogy, I'm using work analogy, but it is work. So one of the things that my husband taught me this years ago when we first started dating, he did this. And I was just talking to him the other day about how he should do this again. And he's kind of laughing because I'm like, you taught me this and I do this. Make yourself a vision board. Seriously, it doesn't matter how you make the vision board. I know like people use Pinterest and they use different things like that, but make yourself a vision board in a place that you're going to see it regularly, though. So like a wall in your office or on a pegboard or on your fridge, or I have all of my journals, the cover of them, I make that a vision board. So I do like this collage art, this like found poetry kind of stuff where I put images and text and I put those things together. If I'm starting a new page in my journal, like a new year, I do that. So I do these vision boards and these concepts everywhere. So I have these little visual reminders everywhere. And again, I'm committing these things to the page and I'm hyper aware that I'm after those things. So I'm constantly keeping them in my peripheral view, hoping I'll come across them as little reminders and encouragement. Like, girl, you got this. Girl, you got to keep doing the work. So I keep doing that kind of stuff with the visual board. And it has been a very effective, but also a creative outlet. So those creative outlets also work to help you expand your perspective because believe it or not, while you're actually doing the act of putting together the vision and all the elements that go into it, you're using a particular part of your brain that actually fuels positive emotional healing and growth. And so it's this wonderful, like dual type of activity that you're doing. It has this purpose in the, in the sense, the literal sense, like, okay, I need to make myself this vision board because it's going to encourage me and remind me why I'm working so hard, why I have to keep getting up and keep going after this over and over and over again. And it also is this emotionally positive space that has all these wonderful healing benefits and enhanced benefits. So the other thing is when you're navigating these interactions, you need to readjust your thoughts and actions when they stray from what you think you want. So you have to be a steward of your own actions, reactions, and thoughts. So you have to readjust. So when you see yourself starting to get off track, like that person may be provoking you in a way where you're like, oh my gosh, they're bringing this side out of me. You've got to readjust, take a few steps back, take a couple of deep breaths, recalibrate, say, nope, this is not the version of me I am anymore. This is not the version of me I'm bringing to this. And this is who I want to be. This is who I want to continue to grow into. And you've got to just readjust in real time. Okay. Just because you fell off or whatever, say whatever apologies, whatever you need to do. You, again, have that perspective, have the plan, but you also have to just readjust and forgive yourself and others when things don't go as anticipated. So, operate with grace. Things aren't always going to go as anticipated. Things hardly go exactly as you anticipated or envisioned them playing out, but you can be forgiving of the instances where you feel like you fell short or the other individual fell short. And when you feel like you've failed, get back up, dust yourself off, and get back to it. You got to keep getting up and keep going at it. That's how we grow. That's the trial and error part. The second thing that I do is I borrow strategies from the writing and literary community. I know you're going to laugh, but this is where that hybrid thing comes in. I use these specific strategies, and I'm going to give you a few of them, but I use several more than this to assess real life situations. So one of the things that I do is I do mental character sketches. You don't have to write these things down. These are one of those activities that you could do mental sketches. Although prior to doing these things, you might want to write down some of the things that you're trying to consider when you're doing this character sketch. And a character sketch is just like everything about the character. It's not like a literal sketch, although some people do sketch out the character and then put little labels and stuff. But it's literally all the identifying criteria for an individual, beyond their name, date of birth, the favorite color, likes, dislikes, fears, what kind of food do they like? What can't they eat? All those things is you're looking for the deeper things. So you might be looking for what are their motives, values, beliefs? Do these align or clash with my own? What brings us together? Are we friends, foes? Are they an ally or the antagonist in this situation? Are they trustworthy or an unreliable narrator? So you're asking yourself these questions. You're not asking them. You're asking yourself these questions as you're assessing. And these could be very quick exercises in your head where you're reading them in real time. Lots of times you're not meeting somebody for the first time, so you kind of know some of these things going in, so you don't even have to ask those questions. Although sometimes you might be like, I know there are a few people in my life that I never know what version of them I'm going to get. Are we going to get along today? Or are we going to be at each other's throats? So you might be saying, today, are we friends or foes? Are you the antagonist in my story, or are we allies today? Are we the main characters in this adventure? So I go through these things, and this is a very effective first line of defense for me to figure out, like, okay, what am I up against here? And then I take it to another level and I ask, what are the plot points of our interaction? So you, again, can write these down if you're like reflecting after the fact or looking at a situation where you're like, okay, I'm going back into this. Maybe it's like, I don't know, a work situation or a school situation. So you might be like, okay, I'm going to write some of these things down, some of the character sketch things. Now I'm going to write some of the plot point things down. Or you make mental notes if it's in real time. You're not going to sit there with the sketch pad and they're going to be like, what the heck are you doing? That's just weird. So obviously you have to make the mental notes, but you have to be prepared to be thinking about what mental notes you're even trying to make. Okay. So again, what brought you together? What sequence of events are at work? So just like when you pick the plot points, if you're trying to break down like a story, you're thinking, what events are at work? What becomes the conflict or problem that you're left to overcome or solve? So that's usually the thing that gets everything really tense, is once you see that conflict or the issue starting to boil, and then you're like, oh my God, right? Your ultimate goal is, well, I can't flee. and I can't freeze here. So how do I get into motion here to solve this problem? Are there things that I can do right now to solve this? Is there a perspective that I need to adjust, that I need to see? What else do I need to see here in order to, again, to resolve this? What complications are getting in the way of resolving this? You have to be looking for that. You have to be doing different vantage points. You're going to get more out of this when reflecting back than in real time, but it's surprisingly simple to track these things in real time too. So don't underestimate your ability to be able to just come up with just a real simple, like I gave you a bunch of bullets, but you could just come up with your 2 or 3 go-to where you're like, okay, really quick in real time. In the time it takes them to say, hey, how's it going? We can multitask with our thoughts. We do it all the time. We're constantly thinking about what we're going to say as somebody else is talking to us. So now you're going through the regular routine, the regular song and dance of composing yourself and getting ready and taking things in. Here's the other thing. When you start to practice this, you get better at it, and you will get to a point where you can trace forward to predictable plot points. So it's like, do you ever sit down with someone to watch a show or a movie and like in the first 30 seconds, they're like, oh, that's blah, blah, blah. That's me. Okay. People hate watching things with me. If they've never seen it before, they're like, shut up, because they know I'm going to pick something out in those first few minutes and I'm going to be probably pretty accurate or pretty close. I'm going to be on track because I know how this strategy works. I know how these things play out. So you can trace forward to predictable plot points by doing this. And this is a way where this is a whole new perspective power that you have, because now you can kind of foresee, like a visionary, you can foresee something that's going to happen in the future that has the potential to happen. And then that equips you to navigate that space. So it's like redirect without the person even realizing you're redirecting things. That is something that's very helpful. Always, in all of these instances, you are again keeping in mind that end result that you're hoping to see happen. So you've got the real and present situation here where you're like, what do I have? What is my anticipated, or what is my expectations here? What do I anticipate happening? And then you also have your longer term goals. Maybe it's things that you're after with this person or these situations, or you're just after personally in your life, where you're like, I want to be this particular kind of person. You can't lose sight of that stuff either. Okay. So then the third thing is, when it comes to maintaining a healthy perspective in our life, it's critical that we do not operate with what I call blinders perspective. Now, I talked about this last episode, so I'll drop a link below if you want more information on this blinders perspective. But essentially, it's the opposite of dramatic irony, where you have blinders irony, where you have these blinders on like they put on horses, and you have this limited view, and the irony's on you because you are not getting all the information. You're not having the full perspective that you need in order to make informed judgments and reactions in a given situation. You need to be the most informed person in the room when it comes to your own situations. There's like, no one's going to have your back or your best interests in mind like you do. That's just the honest truth. So you need to seek also to fully understand before you even allow yourself to judge or respond. Become a good listener and insightful question asker if you already aren't one. That's something that I have been working on the last few years in particular, and I'm getting so much better at it. And it's radically improving my interactions with other individuals. And not just improving those interactions, it's helping me gain this better perspective so that in these stressful situations, I'm better equipped to navigate them. And I'm better equipped to steer them in more positive, proactive directions, often, again, without people even noticing that that's what I'm doing. I ask pointed yet simple questions. And these can help you gain insights on what the other person felt went wrong too. So you can even say to someone, if things start to get tense and start to get heated up, it's like, okay, can I ask you what you hoped would happen right now? And if you say it in the right compassionate voice, someone's not going to get an attitude. Some people just get an attitude about everything. Again, you got to consider the source. But when you ask someone, hey, I'm really curious, like, what were your expectations for this right now? You're asking them that, and most of the time, people will have no problem telling you what their expectations were, what they hoped, was going to be the outcome, or how they hoped you were going to reciprocate this or that. You got to keep the questions short, simple, and this is really effective with that unreliable narrator that I was telling you guys about last episode. So when you come across that person who is just the unreliable narrator, they're skewing the information, they're lying, they're just not reliable. You can't rely on them to be giving you all the information. So they're definitely falling into this category where you're getting this blinders irony, this blinders perspective, because you're not getting all the information, you're not getting it in the right order, you're not getting, it's just like, don't worry about anything over here, just focus on what's over here. And if you keep letting them talk, they just chase their tail. And if you ask them these really short, simple questions, oftentimes you'll just see them circle back around, but yet every time they circle back around, they're anxiously changing the details of the story. And this brings me to another skill that comes from the literary community, which is called utilizing the gutter space thinking. So in graphic novel writing, you have these panels and there's frames within the panel, and then there's the space in between the frames, and we call that the gutter space. And in the gutter space is still stuff that the reader has to navigate. So you can only have so much image and text in every single frame, and you have to set things up well enough to help your reader bridge the gap between those two frames and fill in what are those underlying meanings, what are the things that they need in the narrative that you just can't give them, because in this case the space doesn't permit you to give it all. But a good writer and a good illustrator is going to be able to set up that gutter space to do some exceptional things. Well, the same is true when you're talking about dealing with people and interactions. We make connections between what is being said and also what is left out. Seriously, half the story, sometimes the most important details, exist in this gutter space when we're talking to other people. And this is where we must make meaning with what we notice going on under the surface. And so here someone's telling you something and there's lots of stuff missing. It becomes like this elephant in the room. And one thing we know about the elephant in the room analogy is that we're very aware of its presence. We're just not talking about it. We're not naming it, but we know it's an elephant. So it's that same concept where we're not talking about it, that person is not talking about it, and maybe you're not coming around and asking them the obvious question because you sense that it's a sensitive topic, or you're not really sure. You're kind of confused. Why are they beating around the bush here on this particular thing? So you're letting them talk in the circle, you're letting them tell you these bits and pieces. And it's like this puzzle. When the puzzle comes together, and let's say there's like 10 pieces that are maybe missing. You ever put a puzzle together where there are literally pieces missing? They're not like, oh, we don't know where to put this yet. It's like, oh, the puzzle is finished, but there's 10 holes in it. So you can have this puzzle where you have these different spaces where there's a piece missing here and a piece missing there, and you have enough of the visual to see what the image is. So you can imagine, not by what's there, but by what's around it, what that piece looks like. And that's the same way we can, kind of imagine being able to fill in that gutter space, those details, and make those underlying meanings make sense. Because if we get enough of the information around it, we can really get a clear visual of what that missing piece is. So I'm hopefully I simplified that enough for you to understand it. And the other thing is, trust your gut and your intuition. Don't just rely on these things unchecked, though. Like anything else, you're going to have to test those spirits, test your theories, see if they align with things, but don't just dismiss it. Don't be like, well, I can't see the physical evidence of this right here, so therefore it doesn't exist. That's a fool's errand. Okay, you need to trust your gut and intuition and realize that it's probably trying to guide you. It's probably trying to give you some perspective detail that you need in order to see the full picture, in order to then make the right judgment call and react accordingly. In the end, you'll learn far more about yourself than you bargained for, too. That's a beautiful part of the experience. And this is also an added benefit to learning how to better protect your peace and your happiness, because you're, again, learning about your own character, which is expanding your view, expanding your focus. It's expanding your understanding of you, and it's helping you identify areas that you might want to adjust, and you might want to, change even what you think you want out of a situation. Sometimes what we want evolves as we evolve or as we navigate different experiences, and we think, oh, I wanted that, but I tried it and I don't think I want that anymore. So we have to have that grace to be able to self-reflect and self-assess and then readjust even what we think we want out of the future or future interactions. Remember, we're a work in progress. All this stuff that I'm talking about here is the long distance course. It's the long distance race. It's not a sprint. So you have to put in that training. You have to put in the workouts. You have to put in all the different things that you need for that long-term journey. Not thinking about, oh, I just one and done. I just got to hurry up, do it. Like this isn't like rote memorization, like, okay, what do I need to do? Okay, I'm cramming for the test. Okay, I go take the test. Okay, forget everything I learned. No, these are all things that you are going to practice, and you're going to see that, oh, this really worked well for me. This didn't work well at all for me. And then you're going to hone your craft. And in all these instances, your perspective is going to keep getting more expanded and more expanded. And like every other healthy lifestyle choice we make, it does take this time, but it also takes patience and practice to get things where we want them. And when we align our perspective with our intended outcomes and the strategies that will get us there, we set ourselves up for success. In some instances, we'll discover we need to be willing to remove certain people and situations from our life altogether, though. We have to be ready for that. So there will be instances where you have interactions and you go, this person isn't for me, or this group of individuals isn't for me, this situation isn't for me. And you have to be ready and willing to make that decision. There will be other instances we may just decide to reduce our interactions down to like in moderation, like occasionally seeing certain family members or friends, spouses. Talked about that in a couple episodes ago. Those spouses that you're like, I love this person, but their partner makes me nuts, or a coworker, or somebody in your community, or somebody, in one of the communities that you belong to. You might just be like, okay, I can deal with them in limited quantities, in limited situations. I can see them once a year. I can see them once a month. Whatever it is, you can make peace with that. As I mentioned in the previous episode, when we employ some of these simple skills in our stressful interactions, we really do become powerful forces of nature. The kind of warriors who look fear, doubt, and anxiety in the eye and tell them to stand down.
Well, girl, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, don't forget to follow my channel and share it with girlfriends who also want to restore their self-worth and confidence. Also, if this podcast inspired you, consider leaving a 5-star written review on Apple Podcasts. And as you go through your day, may your empowered spirit, heart, and mind guide you. Catch new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Ciao.